Summer of 2021 saw a couple of absolutely massive announcements in the gaming industry when it came to hardware. That is the Nintendo Switch OLED edition and the Steam Deck. I'm sure that Nintendo was a little irritated that Steam Deck stole some of their thunder when they announced the OLED Switch, and I'm sure that Valve was a little irritated that they announced an LCD screen and Nintendo announced an OLED screen. Like, that's the kind of thing that you would look at the other guy and go like, really? That's what you're going to do? Thanks, pal. Now, anyway, it obviously, because they're both handheld systems, a lot of comparisons can be drawn between the two. And one thing that the Nintendo Switch has that the Steam Deck does not is an OLED screen. Well, we're now here past the 1 year mark for the Steam Deck. And because it's PC hardware and not a console, people are always asking, when's the next version of this going to come out? Like, when will we see the next Steam Deck? And first off, I have a question for all of you. What would you like to see in the next Steam Deck? Let me know in the comments section down below. And if you want to see a video where I talk all about the things, the upgrades that I would like to see in a Steam Deck version 2, also let me know in the comments. Now, we've recently seen interviews where Valve employees have said, hey, look, we're not making any huge hardware revisions where you suddenly have way more power for a few years. And that's probably a good thing. You want the Steam Deck to be relatively stable. I've said in the past that I wanted to see a TikTok relationship between Steam Deck and Steam Deck 2, where the first Steam Deck comes out and it's like the base model. The next one, it just has some minor improvements. And then the third one is the big upgrade over the first one. And I said that I think that a good cycle for that would be probably every 2 years for it to come out. That way you would have a big upgrade every 4 years. That would allow you to kind of keep up with the Joneses when it comes to PC games and getting the biggest budget titles running on your Steam Deck at relatively decent frame rates, acceptable frame rates, like 30 frames per second, that kind of thing. I'm not saying that you're going to be rivaling the PS5 or the Xbox Series X or your beastly PC that you have, just something that does a little bit more than the current Steam Deck does. Well, the current Steam Deck released in 2022, 2 years later, talk cycle. So then we would get the, minor upgrade versions in 2024. 2 years later, in 2026, you get a big upgrade to the Steam Deck. And then 2 years later, in 2028, you get the talk cycle where it's just a few minor upgrades. Those are the kind of things that I think make sense, because then people who didn't buy the Steam Deck on day one don't feel like they've been left behind. But the question begs, what kind of talk cycle upgrades would we see? Well, a lot of people comparing the Steam Deck to the Nintendo Switch, as one would do because they're both handheld systems, they would say, what about OLED? Why don't we just get rid of the LCD display, drop in an OLED, and see what happens? That would be a fantastic upgrade, I think, and I agree with those people. Well, the folks over at PC Gamer had an interview with Pierre-Loup Griffais, and here's what he had to say about OLED Steam Decks. They understand that the limitations of the current tech that's in the deck in terms of the screen, they also want it to be better. They want it to be better than the LCD. And they are looking at all avenues. I think that people are looking at things like an incremental version, that's the talk version that I'm talking about, and assume that it's an easy drop-in. But in reality, the screen is at the core of the device. Everything is anchored to it. Basically, everything is architected around everything when you're talking about a device that small. I think it would be a bigger amount of work than people are assuming that it would be. I don't think we're discounting anything, but the idea that you could just swap in a new screen and be done, it would need to be more than that to be doable. So what I think he's saying here is when you're dealing with a device that small, swapping out components is not nearly as easy as everybody says. Let's look at Valve's drawing board. When they came up with the Steam Deck, the first thing that they figured out was the ergonomics. They wanted to know, how is it shaped first, before anything else, in order to make it one of the most comfortable computing devices in the world. And they absolutely nailed it. The Steam Deck feels awesome. Then they had to figure out how big of a battery could they put in that, because the bigger the battery, the heavier it's going to get. So they figured out exactly what battery they could put in. Then after that, they figured out how much power they could use. And if they swap out an OLED for an LCD, maybe that changes how much power the Steam Deck is going to use and gives the end user a bad experience when it comes to how long they're able to play their games for. Also, how much heat does this OLED screen generate over an LED screen? Now, I'm not here to tell you that the OLEDs generate more heat or use more power. I'm going to leave that to the more tech-focused people. I'm not that guy. But I think that Valve probably had a whole mess of versions of the Steam Deck, and I'm sure at least one of them was an OLED. And they decided to go with the LED version either because of power constraints, because of battery constraints, because of heat constraints, or just because of cost constraints. Maybe putting in an OLED screen would bump up the price of the Steam Deck well beyond what it already is. And we already know that Gabe told us that, look, the Steam Deck's price is painful for them. Now, we don't know for sure, but I almost guarantee that Valve is losing money on every single $400 unit that they sell. I don't know about the other versions, and well, let's be honest, I don't know about the $400 version, but I'm assuming that they're probably losing money on at least the cheapest one and probably some of the other ones. And the only reason that they can do this is because they have the Steam store in order to back them up so they don't just go broke making really inexpensive hardware. If you want any evidence to support this, just look at the prices of other handheld PCs that are similar in form factor to the Steam Deck. They all way outprice it, and a lot of times the Steam Deck outperforms them. He went on to say it's just something you have to plan ahead. When we were working on this screen, we made sure that these could be supported, even if the refresh rate switching wasn't ready at release. It was really important to us that it would all be supported. So it's something that you need to keep in mind when you're evaluating and selecting possible options. But there's nothing about LCD versus OLED, different screen technologies, that makes that a deal breaker. It's about how you're designing the whole system and what's in between the screen and the system on a chip. So essentially here, what they're saying is, look, we've looked at it. For us at that time in 2021, well, actually, that's when it was announced. I'm sure that they were designing it well before that. But when they were designing the Steam Deck, it just didn't make sense to put an OLED screen in it. Well, since then, a lot of years have gone by, and maybe we will see updates to the Steam Deck that include OLED. But will that happen in the Steam Deck too? Or is that something that's going to happen further down the line? So what do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comment section down below, and let me know what you think of Steam Deck's first year. I've got a video about that right here. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.